Hi there, this is Solitaire Ronan from Solitaire Ronan Films, and welcome to part 9 of my Kurosawa Before Rashomon series, which means we've only got one film left. And today we're going to look at the 1949 film Stray Dog, starring Toshiro Mifune and Takashi Shimura. They're paired up again. This is the Criterion DVDs by number 233, because it's still not available in Blu-ray for some reason. I don't know whether there's a Japanese Blu-ray, but certainly in the US and the UK I don't believe there's a Blu-ray. You can correct me if I'm wrong. This one has a commentary by Stephen Prince, who wrote The Warrior's Camera, the cinema of Akira Kurosawa, which is a book that I have. It's very good. And there's a 32-minute extract from It's Wonderful to Create, featuring interviews with Kurosawa, production designer, one of the actresses, and it comes with a booklet. This film for me is probably my favourite of the 10 films before Rashomon. To me, it's a landmark film in Kurosawa's career, because it's kind of the summation of the 8 films before it, and it has some elements that we would see throughout Kurosawa's future cinema and the other 21 films after this one. It's a simple story, and we are literally dropped right into it. We open with an image of a stray dog panting away in the heat, which is going to be a running theme during this film. And then we're literally dropped into Toshiro Mifune as Murakami, who's a relatively inexperienced police officer, telling his boss that he's lost his gun. And then we get a voiceover which never really goes anywhere. It's one of the slightly odd things about the film. And then we get a flashback to him being on the tram and losing his gun. And then we see one of the about 3 chase scenes in the film as he tries to get his gun back. He goes to the pickpocket unit in the police, and a wonderful scene with all these cabinets with all the records in them of the criminals, and he recognises a woman who was on the tram with him, and then he hunts down this woman to get a lead, and then she gets him on to the people in Deal with Guns, and that has a chase sequence and an extended kind of undercover sequence. And again, he gets another contact that passes him on to another contact. And then during this time, there's an armed robbery where a gun was used and somebody gets injured. And then he, because of this and because of his guilt and his shame about losing his gun, he offers to resign, which his boss rips up his resignation letter and says, is bad luck going to make you or destroy you? And then he's put in to work with a more experienced detective, played by Takashi Shimura, called Sato. And then together they try and catch this guy who's used his gun in an armed robbery, and then the gun again is used in a more serious crime. And that's as far as I'll go with the plot, just in case people haven't seen it before. Along with Drunken Angel, it's probably his most famous film, before Rashomon, the year after. For me, it's his first 5 out of 5 film. It may not be a masterpiece, it's not perfect, but for me it's his first truly great film. Again, the relationship between Shimura and Mifune is absolutely wonderful. Mifune again gives a slightly contained performance. He doesn't have too many of those Mifune outbursts, but you really get the sense of his guilt, his shame, and his drive and determination to get his gun back at any costs. Shimura is introduced eating ice lollies with one of the informers or one of the suspects as far as the trail towards the final criminal. And he is a very wise guy, not in the Scorsese sense. And he tells Mifune not to be so tense, because again, Mifune does that coiled spring thing that he does also in The Silent Duel. That's wonderful. Obviously this film was still under censorship by the occupying forces after World War II. I think this is Kurosawa's best kind of political statement against the post-war conditions in Japan, because obviously it shows the rise in post-war crime, which again suggests people are so desperate that they will turn to crime. More and more people are wearing Western clothes, which in previous films it was mainly the bad guys that wore Western clothes, whereas the good guys were wearing more Japanese traditional clothing. Whereas in Stray Dog, just about everybody is wearing Western clothes. The scenes at nightclubs, there's a very kind of garish, almost preposterous line of chorus girls dancing without many clothes on. Again, at some point in the censorship process, they were getting submitted so many films and so many books and whatever, they became a little bit more lax. But as long as you stuck things in like baseball, you were okay. So there's an extended scene at a baseball stadium as they're trailing a suspect in the chain to get to that end point of getting the criminal at the end with his gun. So there's plenty of baseball, so that probably appeased the censors. But again, the socio-political commentary is there. There's also a wonderful commentary about the soldiers coming back from the war, who, just like any returning soldiers, would have seen terrible things and went through terrible things and did terrible things. So Murakami and Yusa, who is the guy who ended up with a gun and is doing crimes with a gun. I mean, Yusa even has USA in his name. I'm sure that's just a coincidence. They're essentially mirror images of each other. They were both soldiers who came back from the war. Both of them had their knapsacks stolen with whatever belongings they came back from the war with. Both of them had them stolen. Mifune talks about how he felt like, he felt anger and felt like wanting to do something, but instead he became a police officer, whereas obviously Yusa went down a different road, and when we finally meet him, you can tell his mental health is not there. He is essentially a mad dog. He's turned into a mad dog. The final scene, which is reminiscent of Sanshiro Sagata, there's even a couple of little shots that will remind you of some shots in Terrence Malick's Thin Red Line. There's a mirror image of both of them, which again we're reminded that Mifune could have turned into Yusa quite easily. And there's also a chance that Yusa could have been Murakami if things had broken another way. So it's a morally complex film. The Yusa character, even though he does terrible things, isn't completely vilified. You feel Kurosawa and his writer that would co-write with Kurosawa for 11 films between Stray Dog and Red Beard. They don't vilify Yusa, because again they understand what this guy went through during the war, when he came back from the war. Again, part of the censorship, they had certain rules, and some of it was, to show soldiers coming back from the war and reintegrating into society. Obviously Kurosawa kind of got around that with One Wonderful Sunday, and certainly in this film, because obviously Yusa is badly damaged when he comes back from the war. Other things that are absolutely wonderful, as we know Kurosawa from Seven Samurai and Throne of Blood, weather and the elements play a big part. Desur Zala as well. And in this film, it's probably the hottest film ever made. Everybody is sweating after the dance sequence, when the two cops are interviewing one of the showgirls who is a friend kind of Yusa. All the girls are like drowned in sweat and they're all lying in a heap. It's either this scorching heat or downpours of rain. There's the wonderful sequence where Murakami is looking for a gun, trying to get into the kind of the gun business as far as renting a gun, which again people could argue the sequence goes too long. There's lots of montage with Mifune's eyes as he kind of stalks the streets and the slums, and again it's another comment on the post-war conditions in Japan. But Kurosawa uses a similar technique in Throne of Blood, when the two horsemen are lost in the fog and they just seem to be riding backwards and forwards, and as an audience you start to get frustrated and you start to kind of go, well, get on with it, but then you kind of understand that's what the character's feeling. And Kurosawa does that again in Stray Dog, because it's not like, oh yeah, he goes down to like the slum areas and 5 minutes later he finds a gun. You get a real feel of it's a passage of time, it takes him a long time, he's getting frustrated, he's getting worn out, and you really feel that both for his character and both as an audience actually watching it. Again, the gun that goes missing or stolen is a Colt, which again is like an American gun. It's not very subtle, but again he managed to get it through the censors because he showed baseball. It's just a wonderful film. There's great scenes on the roof of the police station, where again Shimura is giving Mifune sagely advice about you'll never survive as a cop if you're like so tense all the time. The only time Mifune actually smiles is when he ends up at Shimura's house for dinner one night, and he actually does smile and relax a bit. He sees all of Shimura's citations in the wall, because this guy's pretty much seen everything and done everything. It's shot beautifully. There are some classic Kurosawa shot compositions, especially when they follow the chorus girl back to her apartment where she lives with her mother. There's wonderful shots of Mifune in close up in the foreground, separating the mother and daughter because they've been arguing because the mother wants her to tell them the truth. It's just full of wonderful details that I'm not going to go into and spoil if you haven't seen the film. It's got an amazing ending for eagle-eyed viewers. It contains 4 out of the 7 samurai. It is just, for me anyway, again, you can let me know in the comments below what you think of Stray Dog, but for me anyway, it's Kurosawa's first great film. Yeah, I mean, it's about lots of things. It's about, obviously, post-war Japan. I think it's his best distillation of what he thought the situation was in post-war Japan. It's a cracking police procedural. Obviously, we're going to do high and low as well. And again, for me, it's kind of, I mean, because he said himself about round about the 7th film, which was Drunken Angel, he kind of got his own identity. But for me, Stray Dog is the one where he started, you can see the true greatness of the man. And then we have one more film, which I'll do in the next part. And then we have Rashomon in 1950 that blew the doors open as far as the international audience to Kurosawa. And the rest would be history. But again, it's another wonderful pairing of Mifune and Shimura. It's also a very funny film. There's lots of, I mean, Shimura, as often was the case, he got all the best lines. Again, it's a great philosophical film about police work, and again, it's about that duality of, you know, Murakami and Yusa, both soldiers back from the war, and they both take different paths, and then they end up together at the end of the film. It's a wonderful, wonderful film. Again, 122 minutes, maybe a little over long, but again, that's a minor gripe, because it is truly wonderful, in my opinion anyway. So thanks very much for watching part 9 of my Kurosawa before Rashomon. Hopefully you'll join me for part 10. Again, let me know in the comments below what you think of Stray Dog, what you think of that Mifune-Shimura pairing, and hopefully you'll join me again, as I say, for the final part. So thanks very much for watching. This is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, saying farewell.